guys, welcome to my channel. If you are new, my name is Haley, and today's video is going to be something different from what I would normally post. On my channel, my whole channel is based around me having mitochondrial disease and everything I struggle with physically and health-wise, but I haven't talked about this or really mental health in depth of my struggle with mental health. And over the past couple of weeks that I thought to myself that I should really make this video. And this, I do want to say, this isn't going to be easy for me to talk about, so if I keep looking off to the either side, I tend to be really bad with looking at the camera or making eye contact when I'm talking about real emotional things. I do want to say I think it's really important to raise awareness for mental health in general, and especially when you have a chronic illness. And I mean, you can probably see from the title, but I'm going to be talking about my story with depression, and right now I am not struggling with depression, and I'm grateful for that, but I am struggling with a bunch of anxiety and PTSD, and I'm not ready to talk about those two things yet. I don't know if I ever will be, but my depression story is one that I feel ready to share. So I feel like I referenced 2016 in almost every video of mine, but I'm not going to get into it. But in 2016, my health declined rapidly over the period of 6 months. In June of 2016, I almost didn't make it. I felt my body deteriorate as each week, as each month passed on, and it was very hard. And during those 6 months, the last 2 months, mentally, I wasn't, like, I don't know how to explain it. I still felt real feelings and I experienced things, but mentally I wasn't 100% there. And that in turn kind of pushed, like, that made me bury down my true feelings and my anxiety. And in turn, that made me just kind of shove how I was feeling out of the pathway, because I was so sick I couldn't even really think through of how exactly I was feeling. By the grace of God, I was able to be brought out of that flare-up with the highly experimental treatment. But in January of 2016, 1 week, I was on a field trip without my wheelchair, walking around this big museum with my friends, not a care in the world, no wheelchair. I mean, everything was in my favor, and I was energetic. I was at my friends' houses all the time. I was volunteering at church, being in the nursery at church, which I love to do, but I can't anymore. And I lost all of that within a week. And then I lost even more for 6 straight months. And I got home from the hospital in June 2016. I was in the hospital for a whole week, but then I was able to come home and recover. And I want to say it was 2 weeks later I realized the gravity of everything that happened. But July was, I think, when I really started struggling with depression. There's something about depression that I want you to know, every person watching this, that there is no way you can cause this yourself. No matter what happened, no matter what you think you could have done better on or better with, things you would have changed, it doesn't matter. Depression has no preference and is a chemical imbalance in the brain. Sometimes it happens randomly out of nowhere with people who have amazing lives, who have nothing they would think would trigger depression, but they struggle with depression. And you have mamas who struggle with postpartum depression, and then people with depression who have went through traumatic events like I went through. Depression has no preference and it doesn't care. Let's get that out of the way, because that is the most important thing I want you, anyone watching this video, to take away is you can't change it and you didn't cause it. I do want to say something else, is that I deal with anxiety, and I know a lot of times depression can go hand in hand with anxiety, and with me having mitochondrial disease, struggling with depression and struggling with anxiety can be very, very common with patients. And I was always in the mindset knowing that it was a possibility, but at the same time, it's not something you expect. And when I was struggling, I was so clouded that I didn't even notice I was having unexplained symptoms mentally. And these weren't just minor symptoms. I mean, these were things that affected my everyday life. I mean, I would cry at the drop of a hat if one of my family members, like one of my brothers, raised their voice at me. Like, be quiet or something like that. I mean, we're not perfect. We all yell. Sometimes we'll raise our voices at others, but that would make me start bawling, and looking back, that's not normal to bawl over something like that. And I was so emotional. I would cry about everything. I felt hopeless, and you might be thinking, Haley, you got out of a 6-month-long flare-up. You got a highly experimental treatment and it worked and you're doing great. But I was hopeless still. Hopeless that my life would get back to normal, because you have to remember, and I have to remember too, even though that was myself 2 years ago, that I have lost everything I had ever known for my body physically. But I was so angry and so bitter over everything, and I would get so upset. I was so irritable, and I was so jealous all the time. I'm not gonna lie, I was jealous of everyone around me, of all of my friends doing, even them doing their normal things. I was jealous of. I was so angry at my body, of what my body just went through. And unless, I think, you struggle with depression, you don't know what type of anger that is. The biggest things for me is I hated going places, and that's not like me. All I wanted to do was be in my room in bed. That's all I wanted. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to go to my homeschool co-op. I didn't want to go out to the store. I wanted to stay home. I didn't like socializing. I hated it. I hated it. Guys, I'm not struggling with depression, but it's taken me 2 freaking years to feel better about socializing. But back then, I went almost 6 months with barely any interaction with people outside my family. And as a result of that, I pushed and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed everyone away. Everyone. I was no longer making an effort to text anybody, to talk to anybody, to email anybody, to do anything. My whole school co-op, I did half days starting back, and yes, physically I wasn't there, but mentally I definitely was not there. Mentally I was exhausted. Every time, 3 hours I would be at my homeschool co-op in a class with my friends. By the time I got home, I was already shutting down mentally because it tired me so much, and I isolated myself from everyone. Along with depression, I think I was struggling a lot with grief as well, because I felt like I lost myself, and I still feel 2 years later that I did lose myself back then. I didn't know who I was anymore, and I think struggling with depression had a lot to do with it. And I couldn't concentrate. I was there, but I was not there. I was spacey. I was in my head. I was there, but I wasn't there. And I just didn't care. I felt hopeless, and I didn't care about anything. I mean, one of my best friends could have broken their foot and had to have surgery, and I wouldn't have cared. And that now breaks my heart that I wouldn't care about my best friend, but that's how I was. I didn't care about anyone. I didn't care about the world. I didn't care about myself. I was just stuck. Around August, I want to say. I could be wrong. Again, guys, it's been a while, but I believe it was August when I started seeing my therapist. My therapist in one of the sessions ended up giving me a sheet, and she said, circle all the things you feel. I circled a lot of them, and those were the symptoms I just described to you, and then some. Like that moment where she says, you have moderate depression. My first thought was, what did I do? Why? And she wanted to make it very clear that I didn't cause it, and I don't know, I think I was in shock. After that, I remember on the way home, my mom kind of asked, she does every time we go to therapy, of what exactly I talk about, but she has always made it clear that if I don't want to talk about something, I don't talk about something, and in a therapy session, everything stays 100% confidential unless you're getting hurt in some shape or form. But other than that scenario, your therapist legally can't talk about your session even with the parent. And I remember after a while, I just said, she said I have depression. My mom said, I know. And I was like, how did you know? And she told me that her and my dad just, I mean, they're not hard symptoms to spot necessarily, and I don't know how I have this memory, but I remember that night there was like a fundraiser for our homeschool co-op at a Chipotle, and we met my dad there, and I remember my dad asking how therapy went, and obviously my mom had probably told him. I don't really mind about that, but I was so embarrassed, like upset, that I couldn't even say it, that I just said fine. And you're probably wondering, how on earth did you stop feeling depressed? How did you get better? And I wish it could be the same for everyone, but in November of 2016, I went on my Make-A-Wish trip to Disney World, and it wasn't even Disney World, it was just the experience that energized me up again. I mean, I had been hopeless for 11 months. When I went there, I was treated like a kid, like myself. Nobody batted an eye I was in a wheelchair, that I had a central line. Nobody looked at me, or nobody on my Make-A-Wish trip ever talked to anybody about any illness whatsoever, any condition, any health or medical things. Not one person talked about that, and they treated us with such care. And to be able to go on a trip like that with your family for free, and you don't have to worry about that, and you get treated for who you are and not what you are, that's something unexplainable unless you've experienced it. And when I got home, I felt a lot better. I mean, and I think at that point I thought that my Make-A-Wish trip completely healed me of depression, and while it had a major part in getting better, working through it, it did help me have hope and make me feel like I'm me and not a medical mystery. But looking back at it now, I see that I was still struggling with it even after that. And guys, it took a long time. I'm really grateful that I never got to the point where I had suicidal thoughts or any plans of harming myself or others. I am very grateful I didn't get to that point. And I thought I would mention also is that I opted to not immediately go on antidepressants or to take a million different medications, and I'm like, my body is so weird. And of course, if it ever got to the point where I couldn't function, that's when I was going to kind of go down that path, but I wanted to try to work through it. And guys, it took months and months, and I feel like something I never even thought of. Obviously, I didn't think through the symptoms of depression before I struggled with it, but I didn't think that there would be lasting effects on your life even when you're not dealing with depression. And I know that can be a little confusing, and if I were you, it would be confusing for me, but this is just for me, my story. But after that trip, I felt hopeful again, and I felt ready to build up my endurance and to take care of my body. Still, guys, it took me like a year to get through all the anger and bitterness, and sometimes I feel angry and bitter still. Not to the extent of what it was, but it took a lot of working through a lot of techniques to calm myself down, a lot of different things, as well as grief. Guys, sometimes I still struggle with grief over who I used to be and who I will never be. Like, that happens. I've worked through that, and over time that's gotten better, and my emotions have gotten better. I'm able to control them more, unless I'm talking about something hard to talk about, then I kind of start crying like a baby. But I don't cry at the drop of a hat anymore. It takes quite a bit now to make me cry. And as for being emotionally exhausted socially, guys, that took a year or two, and I'm still dealing with the effects of that. Over time, that's gotten better. I've worked through that a lot. But if I'm honest, I still have a really hard time socializing sometimes, and I hate going into new situations. I hate going into situations without my mom or dad sometimes, or one of my friends. If neither of those, the core people, are there, it makes me freak out and have an anxiety attack. It makes me want to go home. But my family, I have an amazing family who has supported me through everything, and my parents pushed me out of my comfort zone. They pushed me because they knew if they didn't push me, I wouldn't push myself. And over time, I was able to build up my endurance to going places and not being socially exhausted. But depression is a slippery slope, and it's a roller coaster. And one other thing I do want to add is that a lot of people think if you are depressed, you can't laugh or you can't smile, and that is not true. I still laughed at my brother's cheesy jokes and my friend's stupid jokes too, and I smiled still. You can still have a good time even when you're struggling a lot with your mental health. I don't even know how to end this video. I guess I just wanted to talk about this because I feel like there's such a stigma with depression that it's not talked about enough, and it's taken me 2 years to mentally be able to share this, and it's not easy. I mean, only 2 of my friends know. Out of all of my friends, only 2. Then only my family knows. Some people might be shocked that I've dealt with this because they never see me sad, which is not true. I just am really good at faking being okay. It's not easy, and if you are struggling with depression, the best thing you can do is to find a therapist, and if you're unable to do that, to just find someone you can trust so you can vent. But obviously, if you are struggling with depression, I think it's a really good idea and a really smart idea to look into a therapist, a psychologist, because that's what ultimately helped me, and that's what I'm grateful for. So I hope you guys feel comforted by this video if you are struggling with depression or someone else's. And don't forget to click that like button if you thought this was a good video to talk about. Don't forget to subscribe down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye guys.